We're live streaming now.
Awesome. 2 minutes to kick off. Hi, welcome to AngelNV and our founder bootcamp for November 30th. We're going to hear from Maggie Sailing really soon on the subject of Tam, Sam, and Som. Before we do, I'm going to thank our sponsors and just give you a little bit of information about our program. So many thanks to our sponsors, Brex Corporate Card, City of Las Vegas, and Glassboard Technologies. If you're a founder and you're looking for some credit that you don't have to sign personally on the line for, then I'm going to suggest that you check out the link that you see there from Brex. Not only do they not make you personally sign for the card, it actually goes against your company. But you get a $500 bonus in your corporate card account when you open an account, get approved and open an account at Brex. City of Las Vegas has just been such a great sponsor of Startup NV, Angel NV, and all of our programs, not only providing us the space to do it, but some of the funds that it requires to put this program on. So thanks a lot to the City of Las Vegas. They're strong supporters. And finally, Glassboard Technology. We use all of their technology to on the back end and the administrative part of creating our funds and funding the companies that we fund, not only for AngelNV, but for all the work we do at FundNV as well. So if you're a investor and you're looking for a platform to do your special purpose vehicles or your funds on, where all of the legal formation of the companies and the taxes and all the rest of that stuff that you have to do as a funder are taken care of for you, then I'm going to suggest that you check out Glassboard Technologies. It's a really great app. In terms of our program and what we do, we run an incubator and an accelerator program for scalable startups in the state of Nevada. And we kind of chunk things into 3 different areas in terms of how we evaluate and help startups. So we help right from when companies start with an idea and are going through the feasibility stage. We have a program, an incubator program called GrowNB that helps founders get from that idea stage to the point where they have a beta or an MVP or a version 1.0 of their product and they're ready to go to market. And that's usually when companies kind of trip over into our accelerator program, where we actually provide some funding, $50,000 or more for companies that are accepted into the accelerator program, which happens on our pitch days every other Wednesday. So our next pitch day is next week on Wednesday. And hopefully we'll see some new companies there pitching to us. Actually, that's not true.
Our next pitch day is
tomorrow. This next pitch day is this week on Wednesday, day after tomorrow or tomorrow. So pitch day is every other Wednesday. And once you're in the accelerator, you get an investment and we help you through the viability stage and through revenue generation, and then help you go out and raise a seed round at that point. So we have the 3 programs for our founders: GrowNV, the incubator, Startup NV, the accelerator program, and AngelNV, this founder bootcamp that you're in right now. And then on the investor side, we have our Fund NV investors. New investors are still being accepted in that fund through the end of this year. So just about 4 weeks from now. AngelNV, the investment side of this fund, the founder of the Angel Bootcamp, starts on February 2nd. We're onboarding new investors for that right now. And then Seed NV is a seed fund that will do follow-on investing to companies that are invested in both of those funds, by both of those funds, and other outside companies as well. That fund will start making investments about the middle of 2022. So does this work? Has this worked? This accelerator program that we started back in 2017. These numbers have ticked up a little bit during the course of October and November. We're a little over 700 pitches now. 54 companies have come through the accelerator. 30 of them have been funded, and just over $70 million has been raised by these companies. So it does work, and we appreciate your coming out here to listen to our speaker tonight and to participate in this program. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Maggie Sailing. So you recognize that the last names are the same. If you don't already know Maggie, now you'll know that we're married, been married for 36 years now. And I got it right. And Maggie runs all of our onboarding and sort of pitch quality efforts at Startup NV. So any of you who have sent us a pitch deck to review, or thanks, Chris or Christopher, anybody who's engaged with us around pitch decks know that we are kind of freaky about making sure that your TAM, SAM, and SOM, your definition of your market size, is right. And Maggie has just taken this topic on and advises anybody who asks about it. If you've seen videos on our YouTube channel, you'll know that this particular presentation that you're going to hear from Maggie tonight is one of our most popular ones. And I got to tell you, listening to hundreds of pitches every year, this is the one that founders most often get wrong. And it's one of the most important things that you can do. You can't be lazy on this stuff. So what you're about to hear over the course of the next 45 minutes-ish, hour-ish, is pure gold. So sit back, listen to the wisdom, and then get ready to ask your questions. So take it away, Maggie.
Hi, thanks, Jeff. It is really important, but it's something that investors are really interested in. But I would say that it's something that a founder should be absolutely the most interested in. I think there's two things you can do that will really serve you well as a founder. And the first thing is talk to customers. You need to do customer validation to make sure that you're building or making something that people want.
Maggie, pardon me. Your view on the slides is actually your presenter view as well. It's not actually showing. It's showing the PowerPoint, it's showing your presentation, but it's showing the presenter's view.
Let me get out of that. Let me put it over here. And stop sharing. And start sharing.
There we go. Good to go.
Okay. Okay. So my point was, two things you really need to do for you before you get on this roller coaster ride that is a startup. And that is to talk to your customers to make sure that you're talking to people that you don't know, that have no interest in making you that happy, to see that you are making something that people will want to buy and at what price point they will want to buy it. So we call that customer validation. And then the second thing you should do is understand how big your market is. By understanding how big your market is and how much of an impact you think that you can make, you can understand whether you're on a juggernaut or if you have a nice, stable family income. And there's a huge difference between them. Investors are not likely to want to help you with the latter part if it's just a family-based business, but the Small Business Administration might be willing to help you with that. But an investor who is looking for a 10 to 30x return is not going to be interested in a family business, a Main Street type business. So you should be very realistic with yourself when it comes to the market size. So they've been reduced to these things called TAM, SAM, and SOM. So what is that? TAM is the total addressable market, and this is all the people in all the world who could possibly buy your product or service. Okay, it's a really good starting point, and this type of number is researchable. And in fact, when it comes to research, the two top numbers, TAM and SAM, need to be researched. They cannot be derived. So you need to engage with some sort of research ability to get to what the market currently is. So TAM, we can say that's the whole world. And SAM, which is the serviceable available market, would be probably taking it down to the United States. Now, if you're doing a purely internet business, you might pick a couple of different countries where you have the ability to market your product or service. But along with understanding how big the market is, you need to also understand how are you going to get your customers. So you want to pick an area for your service available market where you can afford to actually make inroads into that market. So the places where you can find research on what the total addressable market is, you should also be able to chunk that down into the serviceable available market, which would be either the United States, or if you are doing a mom and pop business, then it would be Las Vegas, let's say, that you're going to open a certain kind of restaurant in Las Vegas. So you should be able to, with the research, figure out what the TAM and the SAM are. Now for SOM, this is your serviceable obtainable market. And there's a couple of rules about this, my rules. They need to be time bound. So what you're trying to derive is how much you think you can realistically make in, say, 3 to 5 years in your portion of SAM. So you can see on the left side, we have this circle within circles. This is called a stacked Venn diagram. And it is the easiest way to understand these numbers because they are all smaller percentages of the one above them. Now, just how important is understanding your market size? So in this slide, we have a picture of several sort of well-known venture capitalists. And in looking at slide decks from companies, they all want to see the market opportunity or the market size, and they want to see it pretty early on. So this is generally which slides are required by each of these different groups or individuals. And most of them want to start with the problem and then the solution, and then understanding how big a problem this is. What is the opportunity? So it's really, like I said, it's something that should be included. We'll ding you on it if you haven't done it properly. And it needs to be done in dollars, not people. Understanding the number of people that are in your particular target market is helpful, but it should be depicted in terms of what they spend on your product or service. So TAM gives context for the whole upside for where Uber is now. Uber is worldwide. We're going to talk about Uber in a minute. So it gives you the understanding of how big it could possibly be. SAM, the service available market, de-risks for investors. It helps them to understand the first markets that you're going after and what that potential is. And it de-risks it because it helps them understand timelines, like how long will it take you to get there? And SAM is generally 1 to 10% of the total addressable market. Now, SOM, again, I said it should be a realistic projection, and it's kind of a rabbit hole. You can look at a bunch of different ways to try to figure out what your SOM is, and you can get very caught up in it. But the point is you have to be realistic with yourself, and you have to be able to explain it to a potential investor. This is how we see it going. We think we're going to be able to get these specific people to buy in this market. And after Las Vegas, we're going to go to San Francisco. You just need to have a logical layout for how you're getting to your SOM within your 3 to 5 years. So do any questions at this point? And Logan, I'm relying on you to read them to me.
No, not at this point. We're good to go.
Okay. All right. So how do you calculate TAM, SAM, and SOM? And there are expensive ways to do it, and there are less expensive ways to do it. So the research on the TAM numbers is out there, and you can find it with CIA World Factbook, the World Bank, these different resources I've listed here, the UN, OECD, and they will have large markets. So for example, transportation. That should not be that difficult. Google's a great research. I was just updating some of the data that I have in this deck here to bring the revenue for Uber and Airbnb up to date. So this information is available. There are databases that, and here's the good news, there are databases that are subscribed to by both UNLV and UNR. And because they are land-grant universities, they have a duty to help the public, the tax-paying public that funds them. So I have at the end of this deck some names of people who can help you with their databases. They have some that are the same in both UNR and UNLV, but they have some that are different. So it behooves you to contact both of them to help you with this research. And the more specific you are with your questions, the better their data is going to be. Another way to calculate TAM, SAM, and SOM is where you start with your first market. You start very local and then you get bigger. This requires a lot of assumptions, and it's usually you end up underestimating how big the market is, but it's a very sort of realistic, pessimistic way to go about doing it. Big corporations can contract with Gartner and Forrester and these other research organizations where you're going to spend $20,000 or $30,000 to get the research done for you. And it's mostly big companies, not startups, that are doing this. A big company that wants to enter a different market would contract for this sort of research. There are some, I list some here, App Annie and Business of Apps, that are available for a fee. I believe UNLV has App Annie as a subscription, but it may not anymore. They change from year to year too. So if you're developing an application, a phone app, they have tremendous data on that. BizMiner and Statista are a couple of other research databases where if you do a search in Google, it will give you kind of the high level stuff, but it won't give you any of the detailed stuff. But that's a good place to start, because then if you know that they have high level information on your topic of interest, then going to UNLV, UNR, and asking for Statista, you want more refined data, they should be able to help you with that. And I know that Patrick over at UNLV is great at doing this, and Ken especially, they do have Statista. Okay, so here is an example for Uber, and this was the TAM, SAM, and SOM that they presented back in 2007 when they were first presenting to investors. So they picked their TAM as all of the transportation industry. And that's, I mean, it's valid, they fall within transportation, but they're not doing ocean freight and they're not doing air transportation. They were a taxi and limo service in San Francisco. So they were trying to expand. And so they were looking at the larger markets available. And they really kind of targeted the top 5 US cities to start with. So from their transportation worldwide as their TAM, they then looked at within the United States, what was taxi and limo service. Okay, and that gave them 4.2 billion. And then they did something kind of interesting, is they actually gave a best case, a worst case, and a realistic case. So in the Venn diagram, they show the best case, which is they become a market leader in this alternative to taxis, and they would get to $1 billion in revenue in 5 years. Realistically, they thought they could get a percentage of the top 5 US cities. And their worst case was, we're just going to stay a 10-car service in San Francisco where we're serving 100 clients. So that's back in 2007. So their revenue in 2020, which is one of the pieces of information I just looked up, is 11.14 billion. And their current valuation is 73.7 billion. But they have gone into broader transportation services. They do have Uber Freight. They have Uber Eats, which you know is food delivery, UberX, and Uber Mobility. So they have expanded what their SAM was originally. The next example we have is, let's advance. There we go, Airbnb. Okay, so Airbnb actually started with air mattresses. The idea was, if I have an air mattress and a spare room, and there's a big convention coming to San Francisco, I can rent this air mattress for a certain amount of money. So, and they started doing that. So when they went to, this was 2008, I believe, one of their, I may have combined two of their slides from their deck for the market size. So they looked at the number of trips booked worldwide, 1.9 billion. And they knew that people who were going to sleep on mattresses were not going to the Four Seasons. So they went for budget and online trips as their addressable market, available market, I don't know. And then they figured that they could get to 10.6 million. I don't know exactly how they got to that. You can see it's not an arbitrary 10%. It's not an arbitrary 5%. It's a more realistic, smaller percentage than that. So far at this point for their market research, they were dealing with trips, numbers of trips, and not really dealing with dollar figures. So in the next part of their slide, they take the 10.6 million trips they think they can anticipate times the fee that they figured they would make. They've been doing this a little bit. So they knew that the average fee was $20 for 3-night stays. And they figured that within 3 years, they could get to $200 million in revenue. So Airbnb went public last December, and their current valuation is 130 billion, and their income from last year, 2020, now this is like, 10 years later, was 3.38 billion, which is a hell of a lot more than 200 million. So again, right time for that industry. All right, Logan, I see that there are some chat questions, or there's chat, so I can't see the question.
There are. So we have a couple that trickled in. Jonathan said first, and he had more of a comment, and if you have any feedback on it, that'd be wonderful. I often find myself trying to understand SOM more than SAM and TAM. And just comment, he's got a question later, but if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share.
Well, SOM is that's your target market. So the TAM and SAM need to be researched. They need to be verifiable numbers. So that if an investor went and did their research with a database, they would find numbers that are similar to yours. And if they don't, then you may have to answer why. But SOM is a derived number. So this is your projection of what you can do. And so, yes, you should be more focused on that. And that is where I would caution again that you need to be realistic with yourself. You're not going to gain 30% of a market within 5 years. I suppose it's possible, but it's not realistic. So
awesome.
yes, you can focus on SOM quite a lot.
All right, thanks, Maggie. Next question from LB. When appropriate is the number of people versus the dollar implies that we actually know the value of our product, and that's a total guess. Where is that stuff discussed? So I guess, they have a question of, if they don't really know the value of the product, is it probably appropriate to use number of people? Will we discuss that? Do you have any feedback on that, I guess?
Well, I'm having a little trouble understanding the question, but let me give you what I think you're getting at. So since your TAM and your Sam, need to be researched. You need to refine enough on the Sam part of it where you're going to start selling. Okay, so if you're going to start in the United States, then that is a good place to start. Okay, what is the product that you're providing? What does it make currently in the United States? And then as you go to SOM, you need to, I mean, if you have an idea of the number of your customers, and what you're going to make, just like Airbnb did here, then you can derive a potential for revenue. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
LB, feel free to have a follow-up question that we can address later. We'll go to the next one from Michael. My unique opportunity specifically is meant to improve reviews for restaurants. However, my TAM and SAM are more closely related to the delivery marketplace, like DoorDash. How do I decide which TAM and SAM to consider, online reviews or food delivery?
Okay, what I heard was that reviewing is what your business is about. And so I don't understand why you liken it to delivery more.
I've worked with Michael a little bit. His concept is about it doubles as a delivery option where there is a rating component for each delivery versus for the restaurant in total. And so he, as a means to improve, customer engagement, reviews, things of that nature.
Well, here's what I would say is you can talk to your customers about that and see where they think it falls, whether it's part of food delivery or if it's part of rating the restaurant. And so then you can work percentages. Let's say 60% say it's more about delivery and 40% say it's more about the food thing. Then if you can do a combination of the research that you find for those two things, and then make a realistic percentage of your local market or wherever you're starting, that's a way to go about it. As long as you can justify the way that you've created your derived number, then investors, they may question it, they may have better ideas for you, but at least you've gone about thoughtfully trying to figure out how you fit into the marketplace.
All right. From another one from Jonathan. If there is no revenue, how can we calculate SOM?
Well, you're taking a guess. It's just a projection.
All right.
Nobody expects you to be accurate, but they do expect you to be realistic.
From Kevin, Uber has burned through $10.7 billion in 9 years, starting in 2009. Why would we follow the model for TAM, SAM, SOM, or follow that model for TAM, SAM, SOM?
Their fiscal responsibility has nothing to do with depicting how they fit into the marketplace.
All right. Just a comment from LB. He said, with the follow-up, we're good. My case is unique. There isn't clear competition based on pricing, not yet. I will say I asked my question before seeing the Airbnb slide, which does include an expected per unit pricing description. Thanks. From Michael, follow-up from his question. My revenue, this is the delivery versus a rating app. My revenue is from order placement commission, not a paid review site. Thank you. But thank you all, by the way. Then Jonathan, great to know. That's just another comment. Great to know. Thank you. So I think we're through our questions, and of course, everyone, if you felt like some of the questions weren't answered the way that you wanted, or if you have additional questions, keep posting them to the chat. Maggie will pause from time to time, or I will interject from time to time. We'll get them all answered. But back to you, Maggie.
Okay, so it's a little bit harder to depict a double-sided marketplace. It's harder to create a double-sided marketplace because in essence, you have two sets of customers, two sets of buyers. So how do you depict this in TAM, SAM, SOM? And so this slide shows Boom Startup, which is another accelerator in Utah. They created this as a sample. I would actually like them to go one level deeper, but they haven't done that. So my understanding is that this was for a two-sided marketplace where people who like to buy customized clothing online could go, and people who create customized clothing could sell it there. So it was a two-sided marketplace. And so they looked at the different aspects that make up this marketplace, custom clothing design. And they started with the global clothing market. And then they went down to the custom clothing market. And then they went down to US custom clothing market. Yeah, but they haven't gotten to the local area where they're going to be. So I think they could have gone one level lower. And this follows suit for the other, custom clothing manufacturing. You know, what is it globally? What is it customized globally? And then what is it customized in the US? And the same thing for retail, clothing retail sales. I mean, e-tail, internet sales. So I'm sure that they tried to go to a number that was somewhere between, you can't really add up 32 billion and 27.4 billion and 24 billion, because then you're almost starting over with a TAM, SAM, and SOM with those numbers of figures. But you should be able to come to with whatever parameters you set that you can explain that make sense to you and that you think will make sense to an investor, come to a figure that combines something from each one of these. So again, the Venn diagram where they're going to like fall together, because these things are going to cross connect, if that makes sense. Okay, so here we have another example. So let me tell you a story about this. Was an actual startup. They were in New York, and there were a couple of guys that got this idea that they should be able to rent out jerseys of professional ball players. So they picked the 5 major team sports that are most popular in New York, which is where they were located. So they looked at, for all of the United States, they started with that as their TAM, and there were 150 million Americans that watched the 5 major team sports. And through their sales channel, they were trying to figure out, okay, we're going to start in New York. How many New Yorkers do we have that are watching these 5 major sports? And then, like I said before, doing customer validation is a great, great service to yourself and to your business. They went to Yankee Stadium and they talked to people, and they figured that their target market were going to be season ticket holders. So they talked to lots of people, and they tried to find the ones that were season ticket holders to gauge their interest in renting a jersey for the whole season. And they would rent the jersey, send it out to them, provide them a way to send it back to them. They would clean it. They would have it available for the next year if the player stayed there. They also were planning to make it so that if your player left the team, you could automatically trade in his jersey for your next most favorite player. So they had thought a lot about how they, as sports fans, would want to have this work. What surprised them in doing their customer validation was that they would talk to people who were not season ticket holders, and they said, hey, I only go to 2 games a year, but I'd love to wear a jersey for that, and I'll pay you more for it. So they discovered that they had this whole other channel of customers that they hadn't really thought about. And then they were also surprised that women were interested in doing this as well. So that's what their customer validation showed them. So this is a rework of that last slide. So instead of having it in table format, we took the information that they had in the last slide and made it a stacked Venn diagram. So you can see it goes from 150 million people to 11 million New Yorkers to 1.3 million who they expected would have some interest. But this doesn't, and that was based on their 11.7% survey that they did in the stadium a couple of times. This doesn't include revenue, okay? So we want to understand TAM, SAM, and SOM in terms of revenue. So what they did was they took their SOM and they figured, based on the research they had done, that 60% were going to rent it one time, and 40% were going to rent a jersey for the season. They multiplied that times their fees. So the one-time fee was $50, the season was $250. And they came up with their revenue projection. So turns out that they're going to make a lot more on the season rentals than they are on the one-time rentals, but they hadn't even considered that. So their total sum for their New York market in 3 years was 169 million, completely explainable. And this is what you're going for. You're trying to make it as simple as possible to understand what you think you're going to do. And then this also sets goals for yourself. All right, so I have more examples for you. Do you have any questions at this point before we go to bad examples?
No questions from the chat yet.
Okay. So these are slides from companies I've actually seen, their decks. And so this was an actual slide. Market information. The total available market in the professional sports industry stands at about $73 billion. It doesn't tell you what. What is this dealing with? And the company expects to have 7.79 billion yearly revenue in 6 years. So they expect to garner 10% of the market in 6 years. Now, of course, we're taking this slide out of context. You're not seeing the rest of the deck. As I recall, this was a company that wanted to make a brand new sport. And so not only were they trying to gain 10% of the market, they were trying to gain 10% of the current sports fans and switching them over to a new sport. I believe that they were going for some competitive samurai sport league thing. Here is another sports thing, and this company was trying to create online tutoring for sports. And so they thought that they would start with hockey players first because the founders were interested in hockey. And some of the other founders were also interested in gaming, and they felt that there would be people who would pay for an online tutoring session with somebody, a star in their field, whether it was a professional gamer or a player that was in one of the NHL teams. So they were looking at people instead of trying to understand how much money they could make. So they used 54 million youth athletes as one part of their SAM and 1.8 gamers interested in competitive play. Okay, but they never took it to the next level. They never said, okay, we think we've got these two different avenues. We think that the gamers have more disposable income, and so they're going to contribute 60% of what we project for our sales. And the youth athletes are going to project 40%. They didn't take it far enough. So, and they never dealt with how much money are professional players making in these things and how much something that would be good for them to actually understand is of the fans, of the hockey players, what are they spending on gear, supportive gear, like not their own equipment, but like how much are they spending on professional players and their paraphernalia, fan stuff. So they didn't, they already streamed, okay. They didn't take it far enough to actually understand, an investor to understand what they were trying to do and who they were trying to target. All right, this next company had a phone case that was a cooling phone case. And so they started with mobile phone accessories worldwide. That's a great start, no problem with that. The protection cover market, okay, that is a subset of the phone accessories market. I've got no problem with that. And then they stopped. They didn't, they didn't do their actual homework to make projections on what they thought their sales could be. So, and they also have a spelling error in the last, in the SOM area, a few competitors. So always, always please spell check your slide decks. Now let's go on to, any questions, Logan?
Yes, we actually have a few. So Anita's asking a question that actually I think was covered partially in one of our previous sessions. So Anita, after I ask this question, see if Maggie has any feedback, I will send you the video that from one of our sessions earlier that covered some of that. But Anita's question is, how do I find potential customers to survey? And then Maggie, of course, you know, we had a session, customer discovery, that covered that. But if you have any simple thoughts that you can share, then that'd be appreciated.
Okay. Well, in your deck, you should also have a competitor slide, and your competitor can be status quo. So it doesn't have to be an actual entity that is making something that competes with what you make. I think you've heard the story of Henry Ford. His competitors were horses, right? Horse-drawn carriages and vehicles. So the people that are using whatever the status quo or whatever your competitor is, you want to go to places where they are. One great trick that always works is if you say that you're a college student and you're able to get into a group online and say, I would like to ask you some questions. Pre-pandemic, the best thing to do would be to go to a busy area on the weekend. If there was a street fair going on, you could go there. You don't know whether they're your customers, but in the very early stages of customer discovery, you have to ask questions about, when you do this, is it a problem? Or what is the biggest problem that you have with X? Okay, you can't ask too many leading questions. You have to try to arrive at, direct them to identifying what you perceive the problem is that you're solving. And then you ask them questions about that and how aggravating it is. And then you can present what your solution is. And if you have a demonstration, you can do that. You get a little bit too involved with them. If you actually demonstrate your product, you're better just to ask them questions. If I could solve that problem for you, or if there was a solution to your problem, is it something that you would pay for? And if they say yes, it's like, well, what do you think you would pay for it? How often would you pay for it? You know, it all depends on what your problem is. So street fairs, it used to be malls, but nobody's at malls anymore. Sporting events, any place where you're going to find a good cross section of people that you don't know. That's a good place to do customer validation. If you're at a university, you can do it at the university.
All righty, thanks, Maggie. Next question. If your SOM is a 3-year projection, should that number be the same as the 3rd-year revenue number in your projected financials? Or is the 3-year SOM more of a best possible revenue case number that is likely to be larger than the numbers on the projected financials?
That's an interesting question. You're always going to hope that you beat your SOM. So you're doing it at a particular point in time and you're projecting out 3 to 5 years. So you should be thinking in terms of those are your goals for revenue. So they should make sense to you as we can get this revenue. But as you get into a 1.5 years and 2 years and 3 years, if you're pitching to investors along the way, those numbers are going to be changing. You'll have more of a track record about what you've already done, but you should also be able to see if you're going to exceed it. And if you've gotten into more markets than you thought you would originally, you thought you were going to get into 5 cities, and instead within 2 years you get into 7 cities, then you can project that you're going to be in 15 cities within 3 years, then those numbers are going to change. You just want to be able to justify it.
All righty. Next question that was from Jamie. The next question is from Ginger. My product is a luxury $900 plus price point high heel shoe. I've done the research on how much the globe spent on high heels, about $31 billion. And then the US is 11 to 13% of the approximate, so about $3.7 billion. However, there is no data on what percentage of that are luxury high heels, 900 or more a pair. In your opinion, what would be the best way to figure out SAM and SOM? I've asked the footwear associates, and they say that luxury retailers call it a trade secret, so they will not divulge that info.
Oh, so you can do more research on it. If you, let's say you're doing the research and you find out the names of the shoe manufacturers, all the brands. So let's say Nine West is, well, it's not as cheap as something. It's not nearly in your price range. If you can figure out all the players, the shoe manufacturers, and figure out what their share of the market is. Some of them are private, but many of them are publicly held. So you should be able to kind of attribute the percentage of the very high end and then attribute that same percentage to what you know the market to be. So you could work at it that way. Like I said, it's hard, but a lot of it is just like trying to make a logical map through it and being able to explain it. The investors may have, some really sharp people may have a different idea on how to do it, but at least you can justify how you got to your number.
Okay, she says thank you. That's all the questions for now, Maggie.
Okay, all right, so now we have some good examples, and these are going to get progressively better. So there are snippets of good stuff in each one of these. So this is the industry revenue for hair care services. So this company wanted to do mobile hair care. They would come to you. And so they needed to understand what the existing hair market is like. So they put in 107 billion for worldwide, and then in the United States. And so in our graph, we're seeing the United States figures, 34 billion. And then they're starting in California, and I'm sure that they did some sort of research to find this. What this doesn't do is it doesn't take it to the next step. And there was not a second slide that showed, okay, in California, this is how much people are spending on hair care at salons, but how many of them are willing to go or have you come to them? So in this case, I know it's a great question. How are we going to figure out what percentage of people will pay for someone to come to them? And so we should try to find a parallel industry. It's not exactly parallel, but you can go get a car wash at a car wash, or you can have somebody come to you. And in California, the percentage of people that will pay for someone to come to them to do their cars is probably higher than many other states, just because California has more cars and they have people who care more about what their cars look like. So you could possibly say, okay, let me figure out how many people pay for car detailing to come to me and use that same percentage to the people who would have hair care come to me, because not only do I want my car to look good, I want to look good. So it's, it might be silly, but at least it is a way to think about something and something that you could justify. Okay, now this example, I love that he says his competition is anything and everything that you can sleep on. And that's true. He made a very high end, bed that would kind of envelop you. And I think it would move around a little bit too. The problem that I have with this slide is there's so much information on it that stacked Venn diagram would really be helpful. So he lists all these different competitors. The adjustable market is 2.5 billion. Mattress market is 14.3 billion. Bed and mattresses together is 39 billion. Okay, so he gets to 111 billion for bedding and furniture. Okay, so the way that this is listed, like US bedding and furniture is more like TAM. And then bed and mattress is SAM, mattresses are SOM. Okay, adjustable beds, that's a subset of the mattress market. So we've got like one market over here. And then for hospital beds and medical devices, these things are a different market. So it's going to be more business to business rather than business to consumer. So that market is 2 billion. And then reclining chairs, I don't know people who voluntarily sleep in chairs. Sometimes people have to do it just because they can't breathe otherwise. But I'm not sure that he would be, taking much share from that. But at least he was really thoughtful about all these different markets and what part he would fit into. Again, he didn't take it to where he was making a projection about how much he could make. His product, like, was it Anita's, is so high priced that there are going to be very few people that can actually afford it. So next example. This was a company that was doing telemedicine. I had a problem with this slide. I mean, I love the Venn diagram, but I think that he is actually telling me about users and not about the dollar figures. Because just before we started, I did, telemedicine global market, and it was like 132 billion. So I'm not sure that he was giving me dollar figures instead of people, but he did start with global, US, and then Vegas market. So this is really understandable, really simple. And if he's telling me about people and not dollars, I would say, do exactly this, but give me dollar sizes. To me, this is the best market slide ever. This company is one of the companies that we've invested in. This is Outlaw Soaps. And they know that their market, their products are outlaw, right? So they want you to live outlaw. It's a whole lifestyle type thing. They know that their markets include military members, REI customers, Harley Davidson riders, and annual festival attendees. So Danielle, who you heard from a couple of weeks ago, she was very thoughtful about who the market was, and this is completely justifiable to an investor. So 8% of Americans, so we've already taken it, we're not even in the world, we're at the US, and 8% of Americans are her potential customers, and the market potential is $3 billion. Okay, in addition to those, she broke it out to how she got to the 3 billion is explained here. So she was looking at the personal care market, personal fragrance market, home fragrance, and added them all up and got to $3 billion. The point is, she can completely justify how she gets to the potential of $3 billion market. And then she already had traction. So her next slide showed, where she was in terms of getting to this big number. So I'm going to repeat what I said in the beginning. TAM is the big picture, the completely upside potential. The SAM is your more local picture and your specific target market. And then SOM is a projection. This is the one number that can be derived about what you think you're going to achieve in 3 to 5 years. I also promised you some resources. So these are 2 research librarians at UNR. We have Tara Rednecki. She does intellectual property, and she is the engineering librarian, so she can help you with this type of research. And Patrick Griffiths is the business librarian at UNLV, and I have referred many people to him. And as I said, for both of them, the more specific you can get with your questions, the better the data will be. If you ask a very broad-based question, they're not going to be able to give you really usable information. So let's say you're doing an app. Okay, that's a good place to start. It's an app, and it's in the gaming field, and it has to do with puzzles. Okay, that is a completely doable search. That's not hard at all. If you were doing an app for, oh, I don't know, let's say trading business cards, that might be harder to pin down. Okay, thank you. And now we'll do more questions.
All righty, thanks, Maggie. So I have a question here from Jonathan again. My business touches two different industries, maintenance and sports. However, I have two sets of numbers to work. However, I have two sets of numbers to work with. In order to get TAM, SAM, and SOM, do I add up the math combining both industries? And then thank you.
Yeah, for TAM and SAM, you can go there. But again, the stacked Venn diagram shows everything separately. But a traditional Venn diagram is like this group of people and this group of people, where do they intersect? And so that is, if you can figure out where they intersect, that's a good place to be for your SOM. So your SAM, sorry. Your TAM can be a combination of both of them. For your SAM, if you can get to that intersection of where those two things meet, that's great for the available market. And then for SOM, you're going to have to pick a percentage depending on where you're starting your market.
All righty. LB says to Maggie and team, many thanks for this presentation. General support to the startup community in Nevada. And Logan, thanks for the presentation at Tech Alley. Well, I appreciate it, LB. There are a couple of comments that I'm just responding to, or I'm sending my information so that we can have a conversation because they don't necessarily pertain to the presentation. Any other questions from the group regarding TAM, SAM, SOM, or kind of sequestering your market in general? So from Tal Luth, Tal has a number of points to make here, but he's got a really big market that he's going for. And to the point of our class today, how do I articulate without sounding too grandiose that my idea transits across the country and the entire real estate market, as well as the need to empower and educate youth and employ at-risk youth? So Cal, a good way to approach this might be is if he has a number of big markets and he doesn't want to sound too grandiose, how does he narrow down or even address all those markets without sounding too grandiose?
It sounds like that might be hard. It also sounded to me like those were not necessarily related things. So your product not only encourages youth employment, but it has something to do with real estate. So are these kids mowing lawns?
Looks Tal, I'm happy to have I'm gonna let Tal know that I'm happy to have a conversation with you. Feel free to email me and we can have another conversation. I just sent you my contact information. We'll see if we can narrow down the question a bit more. From Michael, after doing the research on people who do not read online reviews for in-depth detail, I found that to be 78% of readers. I plan to use that number for all online delivery orders. I do not see this as a two-sided market. However, I want to figure out how to illustrate this without sounding like a two-sided market. How do I do this? So recall that this is the app where it's third-party delivery for restaurants where there's a review component for each delivery, good service or bad service. For the independent restaurant. He doesn't necessarily see this as a two-sided market. He really wants this to be about the review system, but he wants to know how to communicate this and figure out how to illustrate this without sounding like a two-sided market.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to spending some time to try to understand what you're trying to do. 78% do not read online reviews in depth, is what I heard. So that means that 22% do. So are you trying to target the 78% or the 22%? Because it seems like your business, from what I've heard so far, does have to do with reviews.
The 78%.
Okay, so 78% of the people, are they leaving? Maybe it's just better if we talk. And I'm not opposed to that. Anybody who's part of AngelNV Bootcamp who needs help, just email me. You get emails from me anyway. But
Michael says, thank you, all caps, exclamation mark. So, all right, Michael, I'll be in touch on that. We'll get the question answered and put you in touch. Any other questions from the attendees here?
okay.
All righty. All right, everyone. Thank you all for tuning in. Maggie, as always, appreciate it. Maggie's usually the host of these. It's nice to have her talk about something that is really a lot of founders kind of get wrong as it goes. So it's good to have a chat about it. The next presentation will be on Tuesday, the 7th, next week. It will be another pitch deconstruction day. So if you are, and it's highly encouraged that you be prepared to give a 1-minute elevator pitch, which is harder than it seems. And if you want to end up giving one of the 3-minute pitches, then come prepared with a couple of slides. All right. It's always best to, and it's highly encouraged that you practice and you be ready for this, and you can get the experience of actually pitching live to your fellow bootcamp attendees. So again, next week, December 7th, will be pitch deconstruction. This will be an online only event. This will be just online. Feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions. I will be sending in the next week or so a follow-up email with the recording of this session, and also additional resources for any of those that are attending.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Take care.
Coming. And we'll get that video out to you by Friday. Okay, Ty. Ty, sorry, I can't.
Absolutely,
yeah, come next week. Get your 1-minute pitch ready. It's about 100 words. You should practice it. And then also get some slides together. So the group as a whole votes on who they want to hear more from. And so those are the people who get to do the 3-minute pitch. So just, write it out, practice it a bit, get some slides together, practice that one a little bit, and come join us. It's great practice. Pitch practice is one of the best things you can do for yourself after customer validation and getting your TAM sum right. Okay, thanks everybody. We're going to close off now.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for coming.